All right, in section 4 here, we're going to talk about the effects of anticipated inflation or expected inflation versus unanticipated or unexpected inflation. So, and we're going to talk about these things in regards to who is hurt by this and who is maybe helped by this. So, in order to determine who is hurt by inflation, we need to distinguish between these two types, unanticipated and anticipated inflation. And the effects of inflation on individuals will depend on which type of inflation we are experiencing as a society. Okay, so what is anticipated and what is unanticipated inflation? Anticipated inflation is inflation that we expect or that we believe will occur, right? So we anticipate it. Whereas unanticipated inflation is inflation that we don't expect. It comes as somewhat of a surprise, right? We weren't expecting it. Okay, so that's basically the difference between the two types here. Now, if we're going to talk about who is helped and who is hurt by these types of inflation, we also need to talk about the difference between nominal and interest and real interest. So, and that relates interest rates and inflation. So, just in case you don't know, which most of you probably don't know, you probably have heard of interest, but maybe you don't really understand what it is. Interest is basically the cost of borrowing money, right? How much you have to pay in order to borrow money. Okay, so it really, it's a price. Interest rates are a price. It's the price or the cost of borrowing money. And it's directly related to inflation. So just a while ago, we talked about the difference between nominal and real values. Okay, so this is also going to be an important distinction with interest. So there's the nominal rate of interest, and this is the interest rates that we see posted on our credit card statements, on our mortgage statements, if any of you own a home or have seen maybe your parents' mortgage statements. So these are the rates of interest expressed in today's dollars, right? So that's always what nominal means, expressed in today's dollars. Whereas real interest rates have been adjusted for inflation. So in this case, the real rate of interest is the nominal rate of interest minus the anticipated rate of inflation. Okay. So here's an example. Suppose that the nominal interest rate is 5%. So that's the interest rate expressed in today's dollars. And suppose that the expected inflation rate is 3%. That means that the real rate of inflation, the real interest rate is 5% minus 3%, which equals 2%. Okay. Let me turn on my doc cam and I'll give you a numerical example that hopefully illustrates this further. Okay, so for this example, let's suppose that you are going to lend your friend $100 to buy, some kind of digital device like an MP3 player, right? So the MP3 player costs $100. Your friend wants to buy it, doesn't have the money they need, and so they borrow that $100 from you. Okay, and you are going to charge them 5% nominal interest, which means that they're going to pay you back in a year. And so if we multiply the amount that you loan them and we multiply it by the interest rate, 5%, that tells you how much in terms of interest they're going to have to pay you for loaning that money. So it's going to cost them $5 in nominal interest, which means that at the end of the year, they're going to pay you $105, right? Great. Now, if inflation is 3%, it means that $100 digital device in 1 year from now is going to cost, in 1 year, will be $103, okay? $103. So when your friend pays you back $105 for borrowing that $100, you basically gain $2 because you could have bought that device for yourself when it was $100. Now it's $103, which you can still purchase it, right? Because you get $105 back from your friend at the end of the year. You purchase that device for $103, and you are better off by $2, which is basically where that 2% real interest rate comes from, right? It's what you actually get back in terms of purchasing power. So that's the nature of nominal versus real. Yes, you're getting $5 nominally, but ultimately you're only better off by 2%, right? So that's where the real interest rate is coming from. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. If not, feel free to email me and ask for clarification. All right, so what we're building up to is who does this maybe hurt and who does it maybe help? Does inflation necessarily hurt everyone? Well, it depends, and inflation affects people differently, right? So anticipated inflation is never really a problem since people fully expect it, right? They're expecting it, so it doesn't hurt anybody. What can hurt people is this surprise or unanticipated inflation. So in this case, creditors lose and debtors gain. So creditors are the people that loan money. So in that last example, when you lent $100 to your friend, you would be the creditor. So you would lose out if there was unanticipated inflation. And your friend who borrowed the money, the debtor, would benefit from it. Okay, so let's see what that would look like, right? So let's go back to our example here. And so 5% inflation, 3% inflation, right? The 3% inflation is what you expect, right? But let's suppose that there's, rather than 3% inflation, right? That's the expected. Rather than 3% anticipated inflation actually ends up being, let's say, 7%, right? So there's 4% unanticipated inflation, right? Well, what does this mean for you, right? So you lent the $100 to your friend. You charged them 5% interest, so you're going to get $5 plus the original 100 back, for a total of $105 at the end of the year. You were expecting prices to only go up by 3%. So that digital device that your friend borrowed the money from you to buy, you're expecting it to be $103 the next year, right? But inflation actually ends up being 7%. So how much does the device cost you at the end of the year? The device would then cost $107, right? Now this turns out to be a bad situation for you, right? You're getting $105 from your friend at the end of the year. Oh, that's not enough money to buy this device after it's gone up in price by 7%. Okay, so now you, as the lender, you have been made worse off. Instead of lending that $100 to your friend, you could have bought that device, right? But you decide to loan your friend the money instead. You get paid back at the end of the year plus interest. And that amount that you're paid back, including the interest, is now not enough to purchase that device for you. So you have been made worse off, and your friend has been made better off, right? Because they end up having to pay back less than what that device would have costed them at the end of the year after the 7% inflation. So this is the way that unanticipated inflation can hurt those that lend money, but it actually helps out people that borrow money. Okay, so that's the nature of anticipated and unanticipated inflation. Now, since there's a possibility that unanticipated inflation can hurt certain people, there's a way to protect against that. And one way of protecting against that is something called a cost of living adjustment, or a COLA. And these are simply clauses in contracts that allow for increases in specified nominal values that allow people involved in the contract to account for changes in the cost of living, or in other words, changes in prices, right? It allows these contracts to account for the inflation, whether it's anticipated or unanticipated, right? They take the actual inflation rate and adjust prices in the contract according to that actual inflation rate. So this is one way that people can protect themselves against inflation, is through cost of living adjustments. Now, there are some other costs of inflation that aren't related to this anticipated versus unanticipated aspect. So one of those costs is called repricing or menu costs. So this basically happens when businesses need to create new menus in light of inflation, right? So if prices in the economy are going up, that means that the input prices for businesses are also going up, and they're going to want to change their output prices to reflect these changes in input prices. But of course, this requires them to create new menus or new websites with new prices, and that, of course, takes time, effort, and money, right? So these are what are called menu costs of inflation. They're simply the costs associated with recalculating prices and printing new price lists or menus whenever there is inflation. All right, that concludes section 4. I will see you in the next video for section 5.